What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world systematically destroyed everything you held dear? Sarah Collins thought she knew her billionaire husband, Blake Harrison. She thought their love was real, their future secure, their unborn daughter safe. But when Blake called her too ordinary for his new life, Sarah discovered that ordinary women can be the most dangerous opponents of all. This is the story of how a quiet girl from Nebraska brought down a $4 billion empire using nothing but patience, intelligence, and the kind of quiet strength that powerful men always underestimate. By the time Blake realized what his ordinary wife was truly capable of, it was already too late. This is a story about justice, revenge, and the moment when being underestimated becomes your greatest weapon. Sarah Collins stood in the marble foyer of the $50 million Malibu mansion, clutching the ultrasound photo with trembling fingers. 5 months pregnant and glowing, she had rushed home from her doctor's appointment with news that should have filled any husband with joy. The black and white image showed their daughter clearly. Tiny fingers, perfect profile, undeniably real. Blake Harrison emerged from his home office, phone pressed to his ear, discussing quarterly projections with his usual intensity. At 34, he commanded Payflow Incorporated like a general commanding troops. His perfectly styled dark hair and designer suit made him look like he belonged on magazine covers, which he often did. "Blake, honey, look what I have to show you," Sarah interrupted softly, her Midwest accent still noticeable after 3 years in California. He held up one finger, continuing his conversation about market penetration and growth metrics. Sarah waited patiently, as she always did. The ultrasound photo felt warm in her hands, representing everything she had dreamed of since their wedding 2 years ago. Finally, Blake ended his call and turned to her with the expression he usually reserved for minor inconveniences. "What is it?" "Sarah, I have a conference call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. She handed him the ultrasound, her face lighting up. "It's a girl. Blake. Our daughter. The doctor says she's perfectly healthy and developing beautifully. Isn't she amazing?" Blake stared at the image for a long moment. Sarah expected him to smile, to pull her into his arms, to share in the wonder of their growing family. Instead, his face darkened with something she had never seen before. Pure anger. "This ruins everything," he said coldly. "The initial public offering, the image, the timeline. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sarah felt the room spin slightly. "What do you mean, Blake? This is our baby, our daughter." Without warning, Blake crumpled the ultrasound photo and threw it into the nearest trash can. The sound of the paper hitting the bottom echoed through the cavernous foyer like a gunshot. "Blake!" Sarah gasped, rushing to retrieve the photo. "How could you do that?" "Because this complicates everything I've worked for," he snapped. "The board wants a clean narrative for the IPO. Young tech genius with perfect life, a pregnant wife from Nowheresville, Kansas, doesn't exactly scream global visionary, does it?" Sarah smoothed out the crumpled ultrasound, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I'm from Nebraska, not Kansas. And what's wrong with where I come from? You said you loved that I was different from all those shallow California women." "That was before I understood what different really meant," Blake said, his voice growing colder with each word. "Different means ordinary, Sarah. Different means small dreams, small thoughts, small everything. I need someone who matches my level, not someone who drags me down to theirs." "Sorry." The front door opened at that moment, and Victoria Sterling glided in carrying shopping bags from Rodeo Drive. Tall, elegant, and sharp as a blade. She moved through the house like she owned it. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a perfect chignon, and her black designer dress probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. "Oh," Victoria said, not sounding surprised at all to find Sarah there. "I didn't realize you were home. Sarah, Blake and I were just discussing the new marketing campaign over lunch." Sarah looked between them, a horrible realization beginning to dawn. "Victoria, what are you doing here with shopping bags?" Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her ice blue eyes. "Didn't Blake tell you I've been staying in the guest wing while my Bel Air place is being renovated? It's been so convenient for our work together." The way she said "work together" made Sarah's stomach turn. Victoria had been Blake's public relations consultant for 6 months, transforming his image from tech nerd to sophisticated mogul. Sarah had always felt uncomfortable around her, But Blake insisted Victoria was essential for the company's success. Blake, Sarah turned to her husband, searching his face for some explanation that would make sense of this moment. But Blake's expression told her everything she needed to know. There was no guilt, no shame, just irritation at being inconvenienced. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said. "Victoria, give us a moment." "Of course," Victoria purred. "I'll be upstairs choosing what to wear for the Forbes interview tomorrow. You know how important first impressions are." As Victoria's heels clicked up the marble staircase, Sarah felt her perfect life disintegrating around her, like sand through her fingers. Blake led Sarah into his study, a shrine to his success filled with awards, patents, and photographs of him with celebrities and politicians. The room smelled of expensive leather and his custom cologne, scents that once made her feel safe and loved. Now they made her feel sick. "Sit down," Blake commanded, settling behind his massive desk like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. Sarah remained standing, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. "Blake, please tell me this isn't what I think it is. Please tell me you haven't been having an affair." "Affair implies something sordid and secretive," Blake said calmly. "Victoria and I have been developing a partnership that makes sense on multiple levels. Professional, personal, strategic." "Strategic," Sarah's voice cracked. "Our marriage was strategic." Blake opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Let's talk about reality. Sarah, you're a sweet girl from a small town who designs logos for local businesses. I'm building a global empire that will revolutionize digital payments. Do you see the disconnect?" He slid the folder across the desk toward her. Sarah opened it with shaking hands and found legal documents stamped with her signature. "What is this?" "Your prenuptial agreement," Blake said matter-of-factly, "which you signed quite willingly. If you recall, no-fault divorce means you get a modest settlement, enough for a nice apartment somewhere affordable. I get everything else, including full custody of any children." Sarah stared at the papers, remembering that day 2 years ago when Blake's lawyers had presented them as standard procedure for someone in his position. She had been so in love, so trusting, that she had signed without really reading them. "You planned this," she whispered. "You've been planning this for months." "I've been preparing for various contingencies," Blake corrected. "Victoria helped me see that certain adjustments to my personal life would be necessary for the next phase of my career. A wife who understands global markets, speaks multiple languages, and can hold her own with world leaders. Someone who enhances my brand rather than diminishing it." Sarah felt like she was drowning. "And our baby, your daughter, will be raised with every advantage," Blake said. "The best schools, the best tutors, exposure to the right people and ideas, everything you couldn't provide." "I love you," Sarah said desperately. "I've loved you since the day we met. Doesn't that matter at all?" For just a moment, something flickered across Blake's face, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Love is a luxury I can't afford right now," he said. "Victoria understands that. She knows that everything we do has to serve the larger vision. You never understood that. Sarah, you wanted me to come home for dinner and watch movies on the couch. You wanted ordinary when I was destined for extraordinary." Victoria appeared in the doorway, having changed into a stunning red dress that hugged her perfect figure. "Blake, darling, the car is here for the gallery opening. We really can't be late." She looked at Sarah with something that might have been pity if it weren't so calculated. "Sarah, I hope you understand this isn't personal. Blake needs someone who can match his ambitions. You're lovely, truly, but you're just ordinary." That word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Ordinary. The accusation that had haunted her since childhood in small-town Nebraska, where being different meant being suspect and being ambitious meant being uppity. "I need time to think," Sarah managed to say. "Of course," Blake said, standing up. "Take all the time you need. Victoria and I will be out late tonight. Business dinner after the gallery opening." As they walked past her toward the door, Victoria's hand slipped into Blake's with practiced ease. Sarah watched them leave together, beautiful and powerful and perfectly matched in their cold ambition. Alone in the study, Sarah sank into one of the leather chairs and tried to process what had just happened. Her marriage was over. Her husband was leaving her for another woman. She was about to become a single mother with no money, no resources, and no way to fight back. She retrieved the crumpled ultrasound from the trash and smoothed it out again. Her daughter's tiny face looked back at her, innocent and trusting. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "Mommy made a terrible mistake, but I promise you, somehow I'll figure out how to protect you." As the sun set over Malibu, painting the mansion in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah began to realize that her old life was ending. But she had no idea yet what her new life would become, or how much strength she would need to survive what was coming next. The house felt enormous and empty around her, filled with beautiful things that had never really belonged to her. For the first time since moving to California, Sarah felt truly alone. But in that solitude, something began to stir. Not despair, exactly, but a cold determination that she didn't recognize in herself. Blake and Victoria thought she was ordinary. They thought she was weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah discovered just how efficiently her life could be dismantled by people with resources and no conscience. Victoria Sterling operated like a surgeon, making precise cuts that severed Sarah from everything that had grounded her in California. The first sign came when Sarah tried to use her credit card at the grocery store. Declined. She tried another card, also declined. Standing in line with a cart full of groceries and a store full of curious onlookers, Sarah felt her face burn with humiliation. "I'm so sorry," she told the cashier. "There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. When she called the credit card companies from her car, she learned that Blake had canceled all the cards, claiming she was mentally unstable and making irresponsible purchases. Since the accounts were in his name, with her as an authorized user, he had every right to cut off her access. Her bank account told a similar story. The joint checking account had been closed, with all funds transferred to an account in Blake's name only. Her personal savings account, which contained the modest inheritance from her grandmother, had somehow been emptied as well. "There was a transfer authorization with your signature," the bank manager explained over the phone. "All very legal and proper." Sarah stared at her signature on the authorization form they faxed her. It looked perfect, but she had never signed such a document. Victoria's connections apparently included people who could forge signatures with artistic precision. The isolation campaign was even more sophisticated. Sarah's friends began treating her strangely, conversations dying when she entered rooms, invitations mysteriously not arriving. She finally confronted her closest friend in California, Jessica, at a coffee shop in Santa Monica. "People are saying things, Sarah," Jessica said uncomfortably, "about you being unstable, having episodes. Blake's been confiding in people about how worried he is about you." "What kind of episodes?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Paranoid delusions, accusing him of having an affair when he's just working hard, threatening to hurt yourself. He showed people some text messages you sent him." Sarah felt the room spinning. "Jessica, I never sent any threatening messages. Blake is having an affair with Victoria Sterling. I saw them together." But even as she said it, Sarah could see the doubt in Jessica's eyes. Blake was charming, successful, and convincing. Sarah was emotional, pregnant, and increasingly desperate. Which story would people believe? The final blow came when Sarah tried to call her mother in Nebraska. The number was disconnected. When she called the hospital where her mother worked as a nurse, she was told that Dorothy Collins had taken an extended leave of absence for health reasons. "Health reasons?" Sarah pressed. "What kind of health reasons?" "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss employee medical information," the supervisor replied. Sarah drove to the Western Union office and wired what little cash she had left to her mother's address, along with a message begging her to call. But no call came. It was as if her mother had simply vanished from the earth. By the third week, Sarah was essentially a prisoner in the Malibu mansion. With no money, no friends, and no family contact, she had nowhere to go. Blake and Victoria continued their public relationship while maintaining a facade of concern for Sarah's delicate condition. "She's been having such a difficult pregnancy," Victoria would tell people at social events, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Blake is being incredibly patient, but it's taking a toll on him. The stress of the IPO and now this." Sarah began to notice other things. Her prenatal vitamins looked slightly different than before. When she mentioned this to Blake, he explained that he had switched her to a higher quality brand recommended by Victoria's doctor. Victoria has connections to the best specialists in the city, Blake said. She wants to make sure you and the baby get the best possible care. But the new vitamins made Sarah feel strange, dizzy, confused. Sometimes she would find herself in rooms with no memory of how she had gotten there. Her pregnancy symptoms seemed to intensify rather than stabilize as she entered her second trimester. The breaking point came when Sarah found Victoria in the master bedroom, going through her jewelry box. "Oh, Sarah," Victoria said without any embarrassment. "Blake asked me to inventory your pieces for insurance purposes. Some lovely items here. Very quaint." Sarah's grandmother's ring, her mother's pearl necklace, her own modest wedding set. Everything was being cataloged and photographed like evidence at a crime scene. "Those are my personal belongings," Sarah said. "Actually," Victoria replied with a smile, "anything purchased during the marriage is considered marital property, and since you signed that prenup, Blake will retain ownership of all shared assets. I'm just making sure everything is properly documented." That night, Sarah lay in the guest bedroom, where she had been sleeping since Blake had moved Victoria into the master suite. She stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how her life had become a nightmare so quickly. She was isolated, financially destroyed, and increasingly confused about her own mental state. The pills Blake gave her made everything fuzzy. But when she tried to refuse them, he would threaten to call his doctor about her erratic behavior. For someone who had always considered herself strong and independent, Sarah was learning what true powerlessness felt like. But even in her darkest moments, she could feel her daughter moving inside her, reminding her that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She had to find a way out of this maze that Blake and Victoria had built around her. But first, she needed to figure out who she could trust in a world where everyone seemed to believe their version of reality instead of hers. The answer would come from an unexpected source, and it would change everything. Marcus Rodriguez had always been an enigma in Blake's inner circle. As CEO of Payflow Incorporated, he commanded respect throughout Silicon Valley. But unlike Blake, he had never lost his connection to his working-class roots, where Blake was all sharp edges and calculated charm. Marcus possessed a quiet intensity that made people feel heard and understood. Sarah first really noticed him at a company barbecue 6 months into her marriage. While Blake networked aggressively with investors, Marcus had spent the afternoon playing soccer with the children of employees, his expensive suit jacket long forgotten on a picnic table. "You look like you could use some air," Marcus said now, finding Sarah on the mansion's deck overlooking the Pacific. It was early evening, and Blake was in New York for the week, leaving Sarah alone with Victoria, who treated the house like her personal kingdom. Sarah turned, surprised to find Marcus there. He looked concerned but not judgmental, a refreshing change from the careful pity she had been receiving from everyone else. "Marcus, hi. I didn't know you were coming by. Blake asked me to check on you while he's away," Marcus said. "But honestly, I've been worried about you. You haven't seemed like yourself lately." Sarah almost laughed. "I'm not sure I know who myself is anymore." Marcus moved closer, his expression growing serious. "Sarah, can I speak frankly with you? What I'm about to say could get me fired, but I think you need to hear it." Hope fluttered in Sarah's chest for the first time in weeks. "Please." "Blake is not the man you married," Marcus said quietly. "The IPO pressure, the success, Victoria's influence, it's changed him into someone I barely recognize. The Blake I knew 5 years ago would never treat his pregnant wife the way you're being treated." Tears began flowing down Sarah's face. Finally, someone who saw what was really happening. "He wants to divorce me," she whispered. "He says I'm too ordinary for his new life. And Victoria, she's trying to drive me crazy. I think she's doing something to my pills." Marcus nodded grimly. "I've suspected something like this. Victoria Sterling is dangerous. Sarah, she's destroyed other marriages, other careers. She finds successful men and convinces them they need to shed their old lives to reach the next level. But why? What does she get out of it? Power, money, status, and with Blake, she's hit the jackpot. Payflow is about to be worth billions, and she's positioning herself to control it all through him." Sarah felt a surge of validation mixed with terror. "Marcus, I don't know what to do. I have no money, no friends, nowhere to go, and I'm scared about what might happen to my baby." Marcus looked around carefully. then leaned closer. What if I told you there might be a way to fight back, but it would require tremendous courage on your part? What do you mean my Blake's empire isn't as solid as it appears? Marcus said, Payflow has been engaged in some questionable practices, money laundering for overseas clients, falsifying transaction reports to regulators, hiding debts from investors. If the right evidence came to light, Sarah's heart began racing. Are you saying Blake's company is involved in illegal activities? I'm saying that success-obsessed people sometimes cut corners they shouldn't cut, and those corners can become chasms if someone knows where to look. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a series of encrypted files. I've been documenting irregularities for months, trying to decide what to do. I believe in the core mission of Payflow, but I can't be part of something criminal. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person who might be able to help me gather the evidence we need to clean house. You have access to Blake's home office, his personal computer, his files. If we work together, we might be able to save the company and stop Victoria's plan. Sarah felt a flicker of her old determination returning. What would I need to do? Small things at first, photographs of documents, copies of hard drives, recordings of conversations. Nothing that would put you in immediate danger. And in exchange, I can help you build a case for the divorce proceedings, evidence of Blake's affairs, his attempts to isolate you, his plans to take your daughter. It sounded almost too good to be true. A chance to fight back, to protect her child, to expose the truth about what Blake and Victoria were doing. Marcus, if we do this, and if Blake finds out, he won't, Marcus assured her. I've been planning this for months. I have secure communication methods, safe storage for evidence, legal contacts who can't be bought. All you have to do is trust me and be brave enough to take back your life. Sarah looked out at the ocean, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. For weeks, she had felt like she was drowning in circumstances beyond her control. Now, for the first time since Blake had thrown away her ultrasound, she felt like she might have a way to swim to shore. What do we do first? She asked. Marcus smiled, and it was warm and reassuring, and everything Blake's smiles hadn't been for months. First, we get you off whatever medications Victoria has been giving you. I know a doctor who can help us figure out what's been making you feel confused. Clear head, clear thinking. And then we start gathering evidence, carefully, methodically, and safely. By the time we're done, Blake and Victoria will learn that you can't destroy someone without consequences. As Marcus drove away that evening, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. She had an ally, a plan, and a purpose beyond just surviving each day. What she didn't know was that Marcus Rodriguez was not who he appeared to be, and that her nightmare was about to get much, much worse. Sarah's collaboration with Marcus began with small acts of rebellion that felt like tiny victories. Under his guidance, she stopped taking the prenatal vitamins Blake provided, replacing them with identical pills from the pharmacy. Within days, the fog in her mind began to clear, replaced by a sharp anger that felt both frightening and liberating. Better? Marcus asked during one of their clandestine meetings at a coffee shop in Venice Beach. Much better, Sarah replied. I can think clearly for the first time in weeks. What exactly was Victoria giving me? Benzodiazepines, most likely. Enough to make you confused and emotional, but not enough to hurt the baby. She's too smart to do anything that could be easily detected. Marcus had been a godsend over the past 2 weeks. He helped Sarah document Blake's financial irregularities, photograph suspicious documents, and even record conversations using a tiny device he provided. Most importantly, he had connected her with Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a psychiatrist who specialized in psychological abuse. Your husband and his girlfriend have been gaslighting you systematically, Dr. Chen explained during their secret session, making you question your own perceptions, isolating you from support systems, controlling your access to resources. It's a textbook campaign of psychological warfare. But why? Sarah asked. If Blake wants a divorce, why not just ask for one? Because divorcing a pregnant woman looks bad for his image, Dr. Chen replied. But if you have a mental breakdown, if you're declared incompetent, then he's the devoted husband standing by his troubled wife. Much better for his public relations. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Sarah began to understand that she wasn't losing her mind. She was being systematically destroyed by people who saw her as an obstacle to their ambitions. Marcus taught her how to access Blake's encrypted files using a program he had developed. Late at night, while Blake and Victoria were out at their endless series of networking events, Sarah would sit in his office and copy financial records, email chains, and transaction logs. "This is incredible," Marcus said, reviewing the latest batch of evidence. "Blake's been funneling money through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, falsifying revenue reports to inflate Payflow's valuation before the IPO. If this comes to light, he won't just lose his company, he'll go to prison." Sarah felt a savage satisfaction at the thought. "Good. He deserves to lose everything after what he's put me through." "Soon," Marcus promised. "We're almost ready to make our move. Just a few more pieces of evidence, and we'll have everything we need to bring him down." But even as Sarah felt empowered by their secret mission, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Marcus always seemed to know exactly where Blake would be and when, almost as if he had inside information about his schedule. And sometimes, when Sarah shared particularly damaging evidence, Marcus would ask probing questions about her emotional state and mental clarity. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Sarah was in Blake's office, copying files from his personal computer. She heard voices in the foyer and quickly shut down the computer. But she wasn't fast enough to avoid being caught by Blake and Victoria returning early from a dinner meeting. "Sarah," Blake called out, "what are you doing in my office?" Sarah's mind raced. "I was looking for a charger for my phone. I thought you might have one in here." Mom." Blake and Victoria exchanged a look that made Sarah's blood run cold. "Sweetheart," Victoria said with mock concern, "your phone charger is in the kitchen. We saw you use it this morning. Are you feeling confused again?" "No, I forgot where I left it," Sarah stammered. Blake moved to his desk and touched his computer mouse. The screen lit up, showing the login prompt that appeared when the system had been recently accessed. "Sarah," Blake said quietly, "have you been using my computer?" "No, of course not. I don't even know your password." But even as she said it, Sarah realized she had made a terrible mistake. Blake's computer required a fingerprint scanner to access, not a password. Her lie revealed that she knew more about his security system than she should have. "We need to talk," Blake said, his voice dangerously calm. "Victoria, would you give us some privacy?" Victoria smiled, but her eyes were ice cold. "Of course, I'll be upstairs if you need me." After Victoria left, Blake closed the office door and turned to face his wife. Sarah had never seen him look so angry, and for the first time since their confrontation began, she felt genuinely afraid. "Who's helping you?" Blake asked. "I don't know what you mean." "Someone taught you how to access my computer." "Sarah, someone who knows about security systems and encryption? Someone who's been feeding you ideas about fighting back?" Sarah's mouth went dry. How could Blake know about Marcus unless— "It's Marcus, isn't it?" Blake continued. "Marcus Rodriguez, my trusted CEO, has been playing white knight to my troubled wife." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't helping her gather evidence against Blake. He was helping Blake gather evidence against her. "You see, Sarah," Blake said, settling into his chair like a predator who had cornered his prey. "Marcus came to me 3 weeks ago with some concerns about your behavior. He said you had approached him with wild conspiracy theories about Victoria and me, that you were asking him to help you access confidential company information." Sarah felt the room spinning around her. "That's not true. Marcus approached me. He said he wanted to help." "Did he? Or did he simply respond to your increasingly desperate attempts to find an ally?" "Marcus is very good at reading people." "Sarah, he knew exactly what you wanted to hear." Blake pulled out his phone and played a recording. Sarah heard her own voice, talking about gathering evidence against Blake, photographing documents, accessing his computer. But in the context of Blake's narrative, she sounded paranoid and vengeful rather than righteously angry. "Marcus has been documenting everything," Blake continued. "Every conversation, every request you made for his help with illegal activities, every sign that you were becoming a danger to yourself and others." "No," Sarah whispered. "No, this isn't real. Marcus wouldn't do this to me. Marcus is loyal to me. Sarah, he always has been." And when I explained to him how your pregnancy hormones and underlying mental instability were causing you to develop paranoid delusions, he agreed to help me protect you from your own destructive impulses. Blake's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. Speak of the devil. Marcus just texted that he's very concerned about your latest conversation with him. Apparently, you've been talking about harming Victoria and taking our daughter away from me permanently. Sarah felt like she was falling into an abyss. Everything she had thought was real. Every hope Marcus had given her. Every moment of feeling empowered and strong. It had all been an elaborate trap. Please, she begged. Blake, I'm carrying your child. I love you. Can't we find a way to work this out? But Blake was already reaching for his phone to make another call. Dr. Martinelli, this is Blake Harrison. I'm afraid we're going to need that emergency intervention we discussed. My wife is having another episode, and this time I think she might be dangerous. The Serenity Hills Psychiatric Facility looked like a luxury resort from the outside, with manicured grounds and a Spanish colonial architecture that suggested healing and hope. But as the ambulance carried Sarah through its gates, she knew she was entering a prison designed by Blake and Victoria to contain her until they could eliminate her permanently. The involuntary commitment process had been swift and efficient. Dr. Martinelli, a psychiatrist who owed his research funding to Blake's charitable foundation, had arrived at the mansion within an hour of Blake's call. Marcus had provided detailed documentation of Sarah's erratic behavior, including recordings of their conversations that had been edited to make her sound dangerously unstable. Mrs. Harrison has been exhibiting classic signs of postpartum psychosis. Dr. Martinelli explained to the admitting staff, though Sarah was only 6 months pregnant, paranoid delusions, accusations against her husband, threats of violence against perceived rivals, combined with her pregnancy hormones and underlying personality disorders, she represents a clear danger to herself and others. Sarah tried to protest, but the sedatives they had given her made it difficult to form coherent sentences. She felt like she was watching her own life through thick glass, unable to affect what was happening to her. Her room at Serenity Hills was comfortable but secure. The windows were reinforced and couldn't be opened. The bathroom door locked from the outside. There were no phones, no internet access, no way to communicate with anyone beyond the facility's walls. The treatment plan was designed to keep her docile and confused. Daily injections of antipsychotic medications that made her thoughts slow and heavy. Group therapy sessions where she was encouraged to accept responsibility for her delusional thinking. Individual counseling with Dr. Patricia Voss, a psychiatrist who seemed more interested in reinforcing Blake's narrative than in understanding Sarah's actual experiences. Your husband is very concerned about you, Dr. Voss said during their first session. He's told me about the conspiracy theories you've been developing, the attempts to access confidential business information, the threats against his colleague Victoria Sterling. Those aren't conspiracy theories, Sarah insisted, though the medications made her words come out slurred and unfocused. Blake is having an affair. He's been drugging me. He's trying to steal my baby. Sarah, these are classic symptoms of pregnancy-induced psychosis. Your brain is struggling to process the hormonal changes, and it's creating elaborate fantasies to explain your emotional distress. The sooner you can accept that, the sooner we can help you recover. But Sarah wasn't recovering. If anything, she was getting worse. The forced medications were affecting her pregnancy, causing irregular contractions and bleeding. When she complained to the nursing staff, they increased her dosages, claiming she was becoming agitated and needed stronger intervention. 2 weeks into her stay, Sarah received her first and only visitor. Victoria Sterling arrived looking like a concerned friend, carrying flowers and wearing an expression of deep sympathy. Sarah, you poor thing, Victoria said, settling into the visitor's chair. Blake is so worried about you. We both are. Why are you here? Sarah managed to ask through the pharmaceutical fog. To bring you some news that might help you accept your situation, Victoria replied, her mask of concern slipping slightly. I'm pregnant too. Sarah, 3 months along, Blake and I are going to have a son. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Victoria was pregnant with Blake's child while Sarah was locked away, being slowly poisoned with medications that were endangering her own pregnancy. He doesn't love you, Sarah said weakly. Blake doesn't love anyone but himself. Victoria laughed softly. Oh, Sarah, that's where you're wrong. Blake loves winners. He loves people who enhance his life rather than limiting it. I'm carrying his son and heir. You're carrying a daughter who will always remind him of his first wife's instability. Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here until your pregnancy becomes too high risk to continue. The medications, the stress, the mental instability, they're going to cause complications that require emergency intervention. Very sad, but medically necessary. Sarah tried to stand up, but the medications made her too weak to move effectively. You can't do this. Someone will stop you. Who? Victoria asked. Your mother. She had a lovely funeral last week. Heart attack. Very sudden. Blake gave a beautiful eulogy about how much he wished you could have been there to say goodbye. The room tilted around Sarah. Her mother was dead, and she hadn't even known. She had died alone while Sarah was locked away, unable to help or comfort her or even attend her funeral. You killed her, Sarah whispered. Your mother had a weak heart, Victoria replied. The stress of learning about your mental breakdown, the worry about her grandchild's future, it was all too much for her system to handle. Victoria stood up, smoothing her perfect dress. Blake wanted me to tell you that he's filing for emergency custody of your daughter. Given your mental state and institutionalization, no court will deny him full parental rights. He's also moving forward with the divorce proceedings. You'll be taken care of course. There are lovely long-term facilities that specialize in women with your particular conditions. As Victoria clicked toward the door on her designer heels, she paused and turned back. Oh, and Sarah, that friend of yours from Nebraska, who's been trying to call you Detective Murphy. I think his name was. He was arrested yesterday for corruption and evidence tampering. Apparently, he's been taking bribes from criminal organizations for years. His career's over, and his credibility is destroyed. So even if you manage to contact him somehow, no one would believe anything he had to say. After Victoria left, Sarah lay on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Everyone who had ever cared about her was gone. Her mother was dead. James Murphy, her childhood friend who had become a police detective, was disgraced and powerless. Marcus had betrayed her. Blake had abandoned her. Victoria was systematically destroying every aspect of her life while carrying Blake's son. Most devastating of all, Sarah could feel her own daughter growing weaker inside her. The medications were taking their toll, causing the irregular contractions to become more frequent and more severe. Dr. Voss claimed this was normal for women with Sarah's condition, but Sarah knew the truth. They were slowly murdering her child while keeping her too sedated to fight back. That night, as she lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of other patients crying and muttering in their sleep, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. If she was going to survive this, if she was going to save her daughter, she would have to become someone she had never been before. She would have to become exactly as ruthless and calculating as the people who were destroying her. But first, she would have to pretend to be broken completely. The emergency surgery happened on a rainy Thursday morning in November. Sarah had been at Serenity Hills for 6 weeks when the irregular contractions finally became too severe to ignore. Dr. Voss rushed her to the facility's medical wing, claiming that the stress of Sarah's untreated mental illness had caused dangerous complications. We need to perform an emergency cesarean, Dr. Voss explained to Blake, who had arrived looking appropriately concerned for the cameras outside. The baby is in distress, and Mrs. Harrison's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness as they wheeled her into surgery. The last thing she remembered was seeing Blake's face above her, not worried or sad, but coldly satisfied. When she woke up hours later, her arms were restrained and her abdomen was wrapped in bandages. Dr. Voss sat beside her bed with an expression of practiced sympathy. Sarah, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this. We did everything we could, but your daughter didn't survive the delivery. The medications, the stress, your underlying mental condition, it was all too much for her tiny system to handle. Sarah stared at the ceiling, feeling completely empty. Her daughter was gone. The little girl she had seen moving and growing in ultrasounds. The child she had talked to during long nights when she couldn't sleep. The future she had imagined filled with bedtime stories and birthday parties and graduation days. All of it erased by Blake and Victoria's systematic cruelty. Where is she? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. The remains have been cremated, Doctor, Voss replied gently. Your husband thought it would be too traumatic for you to see her in her condition. He's handling all the arrangements. Blake arrived that afternoon with Victoria, both dressed in tasteful black and carrying flowers. They looked like a grieving couple supporting each other through tragedy, rather than the architects of that tragedy. Sarah, Blake said, his voice heavy with false emotion. I'm so sorry. I know how much you wanted this baby. Victoria squeezed Blake's hand supportively. We're here for you, Sarah. We want to help you through this difficult time. Sarah looked at them both and felt something die inside her that had nothing to do with her daughter's death. It was the last vestige of the trusting, hopeful woman she had been when she married Blake Harrison. In its place, something cold and calculating began to grow. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't know what I would do without your support. Over the following days, Sarah played her role perfectly. She was broken, devastated, and completely dependent on Blake's guidance. She stopped questioning the medications, stopped arguing with Dr. Voss, stopped claiming that anyone was conspiring against her. I think I was losing my mind, she told Blake during one of his visits. The pregnancy hormones, the stress. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'm so sorry for all the trouble I caused. Blake seemed pleased with her transformation. You're getting better, Sarah. Dr. Voss thinks you might be ready for outpatient treatment soon. There's a lovely facility in Oregon that specializes in long-term care for women with your conditions. That sounds perfect, Sarah agreed. I just want to get well. What Blake didn't know was that Sarah had stopped taking her medications 3 days after the surgery. She had learned to palm the pills during the medication checks and dispose of them later. As the pharmaceutical fog lifted from her brain, her thoughts became sharp and focused in a way they had never been before. She also made a discovery that changed everything. While pretending to sleep during the night shift change, she overheard 2 nurses discussing her case. Such a shame about the Harrison baby, one nurse said. She was so perfect and healthy. I know, the other replied. Dr. Chen said she'd never seen a more beautiful newborn. It's a miracle they were able to find such a good foster family on such short notice. Sarah's heart stopped. Her daughter was alive. The whole story about complications and death had been fabricated. Blake and Dr. Voss had stolen her living, healthy child, and were hiding her somewhere while telling Sarah she was dead. The next morning, Sarah asked to make a phone call to her mother's pastor in Nebraska to discuss funeral arrangements. It was a reasonable request for a grieving woman trying to connect with her faith. What the staff didn't know was that Sarah wasn't calling Pastor Williams. She was calling James Murphy, the detective Victoria claimed had been arrested for corruption. Sarah. James's voice was shocked and relieved. Jesus Christ, I've been trying to find you for months. Where are you? James, I can't talk long. Are you really under arrest? What? No, I'm fine. I've been investigating Blake Harrison's company for the FBI. Sarah, where the hell are you? The revelation hit Sarah like lightning. Victoria had lied about James being disgraced. He was working with federal investigators, which meant Blake's criminal activities were already under scrutiny. I'm at Serenity Hills Psychiatric Facility, Sarah whispered quickly. Blake had me committed. They told me my baby died, but she's alive. James, they stole my daughter. Holy shit. Sarah, listen to me carefully. Say nothing to anyone else. Keep pretending to be compliant. I'm going to get you out of there. But I need you to be patient and trust me. James, there's something else. Blake and his company are involved in money laundering and fraud. I have evidence. We know. Sarah, I can't explain everything now, but you're not alone in this fight. There are people working to bring Blake down, and your testimony could be crucial. After hanging up, Sarah felt hope returning for the first time since her surgery. Her daughter was alive. James was safe and working with law enforcement. Blake's empire was under investigation. But she also understood that she was still in tremendous danger. If Blake discovered that she knew the truth about any of this, he would find a way to silence her permanently. Victoria had already demonstrated how easily she could arrange an accident like her mother's sudden heart attack. Sarah returned to her room and lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the reinforced window. Outside, she could see the manicured grounds of Serenity Hills and the walls that separated her from the world beyond. Somewhere out there, her daughter was growing up without her, believing her mother was dead or crazy or both. But Sarah was no longer the frightened, isolated woman Blake had broken down systematically. The woman who had lost everything had nothing left to lose, which made her infinitely more dangerous than Blake and Victoria could imagine. They thought they had destroyed ordinary Sarah Collins from Nebraska. They had no idea they had created someone extraordinary instead. Someone who was about to turn their own weapons against them with devastating precision. 3 days later, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 40s with sharp intelligence in her dark eyes introduced herself as Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the same psychiatrist Marcus had originally recommended to her. But now Sarah understood that Dr. Chen wasn't just any therapist. She was working with law enforcement. "Sarah, I'm here to conduct an independent psychological evaluation," Dr. Chen announced loudly for the benefit of the monitoring system. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "James Murphy sent me. I'm FBI." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen conducted what appeared to be a routine therapy session while actually briefing Sarah on the federal investigation into Blake's criminal empire. The revelation was staggering in its scope. Payflow Incorporated has been under FBI surveillance for 18 months. Dr. Chen explained in medical terms that would seem appropriate to anyone listening. Your husband's company is at the center of an international money laundering operation that's moved over $2 billion in illegal funds. Blake wasn't just cutting corners for his IPO. He was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise that helped foreign governments, terrorist organizations, and drug cartels move money through legitimate-seeming digital payment channels. Marcus Rodriguez isn't just Blake's CEO, Dr. Chen continued. He's been an undercover FBI agent for 2 years. Everything he did to you, including the betrayal that led to your commitment here, was part of maintaining his cover while gathering evidence. Sarah felt a complex mix of relief and anger. Marcus hadn't genuinely betrayed her, but he had been willing to sacrifice her well-being for the larger investigation. "What about my daughter?" Sarah asked, still speaking in the dejected tone of a broken woman. "Special Agent Rodriguez located her 3 weeks ago. She's healthy and safe with a foster family that specializes in protecting children whose parents are involved in federal cases. The moment this investigation concludes, you'll be reunited with her." Dr. Chen showed Sarah a photo hidden inside her medical chart, a beautiful baby girl with Sarah's eyes and Blake's dark hair, looking alert and content in the arms of a smiling woman. "Her name is Emma," Dr. Chen said softly. "She's been told that her mother loves her very much and will come for her soon." For the first time since waking up from surgery, Sarah allowed herself to feel genuine emotion. Her daughter was alive, safe, and waiting for her. Everything Blake and Victoria had put her through would be worth it if it meant protecting Emma and bringing these monsters to justice. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked. "Keep playing your role for now. In approximately 1 week, Blake is planning to transfer you to that long-term facility in Oregon. What he doesn't know is that we'll be executing arrest warrants that same day. Payflow's IPO is scheduled for Monday morning, and Blake will be at the New York Stock Exchange for the opening bell." Dr. Chen handed Sarah a small device disguised as a medication pill. "This is a GPS tracker and emergency transmitter. If anything goes wrong before our operation begins, press and hold for 5 seconds. We'll have agents here within minutes." "And Victoria?" "Ms. Sterling is facing conspiracy charges, fraud, accessory to murder in your mother's death, and kidnapping in Emma's case. Her pregnancy won't save her from spending the next 20 years in federal prison." After Dr. Chen left, Sarah felt a transformation completing itself inside her. The frightened, ordinary woman from Nebraska was gone forever. In her place was someone who had been forged in the fires of Blake and Victoria's cruelty and emerged as something they never could have anticipated. That evening, Blake arrived for his weekly visit, bringing Victoria as usual. They both looked relaxed and confident, like people who believed their victory was complete. "Sarah, you look so much better," Blake said with false warmth. "Dr. Voss says you're making excellent progress." "I feel clearer than I have in months," Sarah replied truthfully. "I think I'm finally ready to admit what really happened." Victoria leaned forward with interest. "What do you mean, Sarah?" "I was sick," Sarah said. letting tears flow down her cheeks. The pregnancy, the hormones, the stress of Blake's success, it all combined to make me paranoid and delusional. I convinced myself that you were having an affair, that people were conspiring against me, that my medications were wrong. I even imagined that my baby might still be alive somewhere. Blake and Victoria exchanged satisfied glances. This was exactly what they wanted to hear. The doctor says these kinds of pregnancy-induced psychoses are more common than people realize, Blake said comfortingly. The important thing is that you're getting the help you need. I'm so grateful, Sarah continued. And I'm sorry for all the pain I caused both of you. Victoria, I hope you can forgive me for the terrible things I said and thought about you. Of course, Victoria replied graciously. I just want you to be healthy and happy. As they prepared to leave, Blake mentioned the transfer to Oregon, presenting it as a wonderful opportunity for Sarah to continue her recovery in a beautiful, peaceful setting. It sounds perfect, Sarah agreed. I'm ready for a fresh start. After they left, Sarah lay in her bed and smiled for the first time since arriving at Serenity Hills. Blake and Victoria thought they had won completely. They had no idea that their ordinary victim had spent the last several months learning exactly how to destroy them using their own methods. In less than a week, Blake would be arrested on national television at the New York Stock Exchange. Victoria would be taken into custody at the Malibu mansion. Marcus would finally be able to drop his cover and reveal the evidence that would send them both to prison for the rest of their lives. And Sarah would be reunited with her daughter, free to build the life they both deserved. But first, she had one more role to play. The broken woman who was grateful for her tormentor's mercy, who believed their lies completely, who posed no threat to their continued success. It was, Sarah thought, going to be the performance of her lifetime. The morning of Payflow's initial public offering dawned bright and cloudless in New York City. Blake Harrison stood in his suite at the Plaza Hotel, adjusting his custom-tailored suit and preparing for what he believed would be the culmination of his life's work. By market close, he would be worth approximately $4 billion, with Victoria at his side and no obstacles remaining to their perfect future. 3,000 miles away, Sarah sat in the common room at Serenity Hills, watching the financial news coverage on the mounted television. Other patients surrounded her, but none of them understood they were witnessing the beginning of one of the largest corporate fraud takedowns in FBI history. Payflow Incorporated is expected to have one of the most successful IPOs in Silicon Valley history, the financial reporter announced. CEO Blake Harrison will ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange in just 2 hours. Sarah's phone, which Dr. Chen had secretly provided her, buzzed with a text message. Operation begins in 90 minutes. Are you ready? Sarah typed back. More than ready. At the New York Stock Exchange, Blake stood with Victoria and several Payflow executives, posing for photographs and giving interviews about the company's revolutionary approach to digital payments. Victoria looked radiant in a pale blue dress that emphasized her pregnancy, playing her role as the supportive partner of a visionary entrepreneur. This is really a story about American innovation, Blake told CNBC. Payflow represents the future of how people will move money around the world. We're not just going public. We're changing the fundamental nature of global commerce. Neither Blake nor Victoria noticed the unusual number of people in business suits positioned strategically around the trading floor. They looked like investors and reporters, but their eyes moved with the systematic vigilance of federal agents preparing to make arrests. At 11:15, exactly as the opening bell ceremony was about to begin, Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez approached Blake with a broad smile and an outstretched hand. Blake, congratulations, Marcus said loudly. This is your moment. Blake shook his hand warmly, having no idea that Marcus was delivering a predetermined signal to agents positioned throughout the building. Ladies and gentlemen, the NYSE president announced, please welcome Blake Harrison, founder and chairman of Payflow Incorporated, to ring the opening bell. Blake stepped forward to the podium, his hand reaching for the ceremonial bell that would officially launch Payflow's public trading. Victoria stood beside him, beaming with pride and victory. The bell rang once. Then Special Agent Rodriguez stepped forward and spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the sudden silence. Blake Harrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, securities fraud, and violations of the Bank Secrecy Act. The trading floor erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed as FBI agents moved in from all directions, showing their badges and surrounding Blake before he could fully process what was happening. "This is a mistake," Blake said, his voice rising in panic. "Marcus, tell them this is a mistake." "Actually," Marcus replied, producing his FBI credentials, "this is the culmination of a 2-year investigation into your criminal enterprise. Blake Harrison, you have the right to remain silent." Victoria tried to run, her heels clicking frantically across the trading floor, but she was intercepted by 2 female agents who had been waiting by the exits. "Victoria Sterling," one agent announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, accessory to murder, and kidnapping." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Victoria's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "You don't understand," she screamed. "I'm pregnant. You can't do this to me." "Ms. Sterling," the agent replied calmly, "pregnancy doesn't provide immunity from federal charges." The entire scene was broadcast live on financial news networks around the world. Within minutes, Payflow's stock price collapsed completely, wiping out billions in theoretical value before trading was suspended. At Serenity Hills, Sarah watched the coverage with deep satisfaction. The patients around her were shocked by the dramatic turn of events, but Sarah felt only a profound sense of justice finally being served. Dr. Voss appeared at her side, looking confused and concerned. "Sarah, I don't understand what's happening. Mr. Harrison was just here yesterday." "Dr. Voss?" Sarah said, standing up with more strength and clarity than she had shown in months. "I think you should call your lawyer. When the FBI finishes with Blake and Victoria, they're going to want to discuss your role in the illegal detention and medical abuse of a federal witness." For the first time since arriving at Serenity Hills, Sarah walked out of the common room and down the hallway toward the administrative offices. She was no longer a patient. She was a witness in a federal case, and she had rights that no one could take away from her. Behind her, the television continued broadcasting the destruction of Blake Harrison's empire. Federal agents were already executing search warrants at Payflow's headquarters, the Malibu mansion, and Victoria's Bel Air penthouse. The investigation was moving with the precision of a military operation, dismantling 2 years of careful criminal planning in a single coordinated strike. By evening, Sarah was in FBI custody, not as a prisoner, but as a protected witness preparing to testify against the people who had destroyed her life and stolen her daughter. The nightmare was finally over. But for Blake and Victoria, a different kind of nightmare was just beginning. 6 months later, Sarah Collins stood in the garden of a safe house in Northern California, watching her daughter Emma take her first tentative steps across the soft grass. At 13 months old, Emma was healthy, bright, and completely unaware of the legal proceedings that had dominated the first year of her life. The federal trials had concluded with devastating efficiency. Blake Harrison received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for his role in a money laundering conspiracy that had facilitated terrorism, drug trafficking, and human trafficking on an international scale. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing remarks, noting Blake's willingness to abuse his pregnant wife and steal her child to maintain his criminal enterprise. Victoria Sterling received 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder in the death of Sarah's mother. The coroner had eventually ruled Dorothy Collins's death a homicide by poison, administered through medications that Victoria had convinced her to take for anxiety about her daughter's condition. Dr. Patricia Voss and Dr. Martinelli both lost their medical licenses and received 10-year sentences for their roles in Sarah's illegal detention and medical abuse. Serenity Hills Psychiatric Facility was shut down permanently, with multiple civil lawsuits pending against its parent corporation. "The hardest part," Sarah told Special Agent Rodriguez during one of their debriefing sessions, "was pretending to be broken when I was actually getting stronger every day." Marcus had proven to be exactly the man she had hoped he was during those early conversations. His betrayal had been an act required by his undercover assignment, but his concern for her well-being had been genuine throughout their collaboration. "I have to ask," Marcus said, "did you ever suspect that I was FBI?" Sarah smiled, watching Emma chase butterflies through the garden. "Not initially, but there were signs. You always seemed to know exactly where Blake would be, almost like you had access to his schedule, and you asked very specific questions about evidence, like someone trained in federal procedure. When did you figure it out?" The night Victoria visited me at Serenity Hills, Sarah replied. She claimed you had been arrested for corruption, but something about that story didn't make sense. Blake was too smart to keep a corrupt CEO around during an IPO. If you had really been taking bribes, he would have fired you immediately to protect his image. Marcus nodded appreciatively. Your instincts were better than we gave you credit for. My instincts were fine, Sarah corrected. What I lacked was information. Blake and Victoria controlled everything I could see and hear for months. But once I started getting real information, I could think clearly again. The civil lawsuits had been settled for amounts that ensured Sarah and Emma would never have financial concerns again. But more importantly, Sarah had discovered something about herself during the darkest period of her life. She wasn't ordinary at all. She was someone who could survive systematic psychological warfare, maintain her sanity while being chemically manipulated, and emerge from the experience stronger and more determined than before. James Murphy, her childhood friend, had been promoted to detective captain and had become Emma's honorary uncle. He visited regularly, bringing toys and stories from Nebraska and reminding Sarah that she still had people who loved her unconditionally. You know what the strangest part is? Sarah told him during one of his visits. I'm grateful for everything that happened. Grateful? James looked incredulous. Sarah, they tried to destroy you completely. They tried, Sarah agreed, lifting Emma into her arms as the baby reached for her. But instead, they showed me what I was capable of surviving. I learned that I'm not the weak, ordinary person Blake accused me of being. I'm someone who can face the worst possible circumstances and come out stronger on the other side. Sarah had decided to keep her married name, not out of any remaining attachment to Blake, but because Emmy Harrison would grow up knowing that her father was in prison for terrible crimes. And Sarah wanted her daughter to understand that sometimes good people have to fight very hard against bad people to protect the things that matter most. The book deal had been lucrative, but Sarah was more interested in the foundation she was establishing to help other women who found themselves trapped in abusive relationships with powerful men. She had learned firsthand how easily someone could be isolated, manipulated, and destroyed by people with resources and connections. The ordinary women are the ones who change the world, Sarah said during her first public speaking engagement. We're the ones who notice when something is wrong, who refuse to accept that cruelty is normal, who keep fighting even when everyone tells us we're crazy. Across. As the sun set over the garden, Sarah sat on the porch steps with Emma in her lap, reading from a children's book about a little girl who saved her kingdom from a dragon. Emma listened intently, her small fingers tracing the pictures of the brave princess who discovered she was much stronger than anyone had imagined. Someday, Sarah told her daughter, I'll tell you the whole story about how we got here, about how sometimes people try to make us feel small and ordinary, but that just means they don't understand how powerful ordinary can be. Emma gurgled happily and reached for the book, trying to turn the pages herself. She had Blake's dark hair but Sarah's determined eyes, and Sarah suspected that when Emma grew up, she would be someone who could handle whatever challenges life might bring. The nightmare was over. The ordinary wife from Nebraska had saved herself, protected her daughter, and brought down a criminal empire. And somewhere in a federal prison, Blake Harrison was learning what true powerlessness felt like, while the woman he had called ordinary built an extraordinary new life from the ashes of everything he had tried to destroy. In the end, that seemed like the most perfect justice of all.